Hello friends, today I am here with the poem titled The Eve of St. Agnes, written by John Keats. Now this poem is one of the most sensuous poems in English. John Keats is one among the later or the younger romantic poets of England. He was an immensely gifted poet, but unfortunately, his life was cut short by tuberculosis when he was around 25 or 26. Now, Keats is remembered for many of his beautiful poems, including Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode to the West Wind, and I have done a video on the Ode on a Grecian Urn where I have spoken in great detail about John Keats and his poetry. Now, let's go on to the poem, The Eve of St. Agnes, which is a beautiful narrative poem, and it is a long poem running to 378 lines. It is divided into 42 stanzas. Each stanza has 9 lines and is what you would term a Spenserian stanza, where the first 8 lines are in iambic pentameter and the last line is in iambic hexameter. So this last iambic hexameter line is also called an alexandrine. So this 9-line Spenserian stanza, you have 42 of them in this poem. The rhyme scheme is ABAB, BCBC, C. Now let me tell you about the significance of the title, The Eve of St. Agnes. Now in medieval England, the Eve of St. Agnes was traditionally celebrated on 20th January. St. Agnes is considered to be the patron saint of chastity and girls. On St. Agnes's Eve, if young women spend the day in prayer and undertake fasting and go to bed in a very prayerful mood, they would dream, or the future husband would appear in the dream. So that belief was prevalent in the medieval England, and this particular poem also has a medieval setting because the Romantic writers were fascinated with the medieval world, and Keats especially has set many of his poems in a medieval atmosphere. And here too you have the same. It is a winter night. Now you know that January 20th is winter. It's very cold and there is a storm and squall outside, and there is a castle which is the home of Madeline, who is the lady of this poem. And let's see how the poem begins. The first stanza. St. Agnes's Eve, ah, bitter chill it was. The owl, for all his feathers, was a cold. The hare limped trembling through the frozen grass, and silent was the flock in woolly fold. Numb were the beadsman's fingers while he told his rosary, and while his frosted breath, like pious incense from a censer old, seemed taking flight for heaven without a death, past the sweet Virgin's picture, while his prayer he saith. So, in the first stanza, the poet tells us that it was St. Agnes's Eve, and it was very cold, bitter chill it was, and the whole world was kind of cold and not exactly frozen, but very cold. The owl, for all his feathers was a cold. So even the owl, which is a nocturnal bird, which is used to the cold nights, even the owl was kind of feeling cold in spite of all his feathers. For all his feathers means in spite of abundance of feathers, he was feeling a cold. and the hair, it limped, trembling through the frozen grass. So the grass was frozen, and the hair was limping because of the cold. And in the woolly fold, in the sheep folds, that's why he calls them woolly fold, uh, the sheep were silent because they were all huddled together to keep themselves warm. And they were too cold to bleat. And now we come to, after all these animals, the owl and the hare and the sheep, now we come to a human being. And who is that? It is the beadsman. The beadsman's fingers were numb while he told the rosary. Now, the beadsman is a kind of an ascetic or a hermit, and he there was those days in the medieval times there was the practice of uh, employing beadsmen in aristocratic households, and their job was to pray for the family, for the well-being of the family. And so here we have a beadsman who was praying with a rosary in his hand. He's called a beadsman because he always has this rosary in his hands and the beads. He goes on, rolling the beads of the rosary. And his fingers were numb with the cold, and his fasted, as he chants his prayers, the breath comes out and it gets frosted because it is so cold. So the warm breath that comes out of his mouth, it is frosted. And it reminds one of a censer old. What is a censer? A censer is a container in which incense is burned. In the church and such places, you have the incense burned, and when it is waved around, when it is kind of waved, you have a censer is a container in which incense is burned, and so you can see when incense burns, you have white fumes emanating from the censer. So here, the beadsman who emanates this frosted breath, whose breath comes out in white frosts, is compared to a censer with white fumes coming out of it. His frosted breath seemed taking flight for heaven without a death. So his breath seems to be passing away into heaven. Past the sweet Virgin's picture while his prayer he said. And there you can also see the picture of sweet Virgin, Mother Mary. Her picture is there, and you can see this his breath moving past the picture while he chants his prayer. So that is what we see in stanza 1, a very vivid picture of the cold atmosphere. Now the second stanza. His prayer, he said, this patient holy man, then takes his lamp and riseth from his knees, and back returneth meagre, barefoot, wan, along the chapel aisle by slow degrees. The sculptured dead on each side seem to freeze, imprisoned in black purgatorial rails. Knights, ladies, praying in dumb oratories, he passeth by. And his weak spirit fails to think how they may ache in icy hoods and mails. Now, in this second stanza, we see some movement. We see that the old man has completed his prayers and he rises to his feet. He had been kneeling down, now he rises up and he takes his lamp, and you see that he is meager in the sense he is thin, and he is barefoot, he is wan, means he's tired and he's thin and he's weak. Meager can also mean that he is very meagerly clad, in the sense he's just wearing a robe, and he moves along the chapel. He's moving away from the place where he was praying, and as he moves, you can see the sculptures on both sides, and now your attention is drawn towards these sculptures, and these are the sculptures of the dead people of that family. So obviously this is um, an aristocratic family where you had a lot of important people who are now dead, and so their sculptures are put up on either side of the chapel. And so he is moving past them. The sculpture dead on each side seem to freeze. They're all imprisoned in black purgatorial rails. Now you can see pictures of knights and ladies, and they all seem to be praying, dumb oratories, in the sense that they all are all maybe praying, but they are dumb because they have no voice, they do not move. And he passes them by. And when he looks at them, as he passes by, he looks at them and he feels uh, sorry for them, because he wonders how cold they might be feeling in their icy hoods and nails. So the knights who are wearing the hoods and the mails, it's not exactly warm clothing. And so his weak spirit in the sense he is a very, a frail-hearted person, and he feels sorry for these sculptures who stand there clad in icy hoods and nails. Now in the third stanza, now we follow the movement of the beadsman. Northward he turneth through a little door, and scarce 3 steps, ere music's golden tongue flattered to tears this aged man and poor. But no, already had his death bell rung, the joys of all his life were said and sung. His was harsh penance on St. Agnes's eve. Another way he went, and soon among rough ashes sat he for his soul's reprieve, and all night kept awake for sinners' sake to grieve. So he moves out of the chapel and turns northward. There is a small door. He opens the door and he goes out, and he just takes about 3 steps, and his ears are greeted by music's golden tongue. And such beautiful music flows into his ears, and as soon as he listens to the music, tears well up in his eyes, because it's such beautiful music. That is why flattered, that music can, you know, uh, can arouse such passion in our hearts. And so here too, when he listens to the music, the beautiful music floating or pervading uh, the atmosphere, for a second, he stands there and he listens to it, and he's overwhelmed by the beauty of the music. But then he decides, no, that is not where I'm supposed to go, because his death bell had already rung. He was an old man who was awaiting his death. He knew that he would soon be facing death, and he had already lived his life of joy. So the joys of all his life were said and sung. So he had lived a full life, and the pleasures of life, including good music, good food, warmth, happiness, love, none of these were for him. And so he turned away, and another way he went. And where did he go? He went to a room where ashes were scattered. That was his place. He went there and he sat amidst the ashes. Now, in the medieval times, it was believed that the ascetics and the hermits who live in seclusion from the others, who keep away from all worldly pleasures, they would spend sleepless nights in ashes, sitting in the ashes and praying for it was a kind of a penance that they would do for the sins, for their own sins and for the sins of others. So here he goes there, he sits amidst the ashes, and he keeps awake all night to pray for the sinners and to worry for them, because that is what a beadsman is expected to do. His duty is to uh, uh, undertake penance and pray for the family where he is employed. Now, stanza 4. That ancient beadsman heard the prelude soft, and so it chanced, for many a door was wide from hurry to and fro. Soon up aloft, the silver snarling trumpets can to chide, the level chambers ready with their pride were glowing to receive 1,000 guests. That the carved angels, ever eager-eyed, stared, where upon their heads the cornice rests, with hair blown back and wings put crosswise on their breasts. So, this in stanza 4, once again, there is this mention of the soft music that the old beadsmen had heard. And now music kept wafting in and out because many of the doors of the castle were open because people were hurrying in and out, and sometimes they forgot to close a door or two. And so music wafted in and out. And very soon, things were, warming up inside because there was a grand feast to be held. And so the trumpets, the silver trumpets, were making loud noises, and all the chambers, that is the rooms, which were all decorated in order to receive, decorated and arranged in order to receive 1,000 guests. The rooms were all set, and in most of these rooms you had carved angels. So you had little angels carved, and they were placed on the walls, and on the heads the cornice rests. Now the cornice is the part of the wall just below the roof, and in some grand homes and buildings, you had that part of the cornice. You had decorated cornice. You had a decorated cornice where you had carvings. And so here, these angels were kept, or they were placed, these carved angels were uh, kept in such a way that the cornice rested on their heads, and the hair was blown back, and they had wide staring eyes, and it is as if they were all alive. They were looking, standing above, and they had wings too. They had wings put crosswise on their breasts. So little sweet angels with open eyes, and they were very eagerly watching they were watching all the goings on below them. That's a nice, a cute picture of these angels, eager-eyed, trying to drink up trying to look at all the people who were coming and going, and all the activities and the hustle and bustle going on. So that was stanza 4. Now stanza 5. At length burst in the argent revelry, with plume, tiara, and all rich array, numerous as shadows haunting fairly the brain, new stuffed in youth, with triumphs gay of old romance. These let us wish away, and turn, sole thoughted, to one lady there, whose heart had brooded all that wintry day on love, and winged Agnes's saintly care, as she had heard old dames full many times declare. So now he in stanza 5, the poet tells us about the revelry going on in those halls, in those rooms. Argent is silver, so there is a lot of gold and silver, people wearing a lot of ornaments, and women wearing tiaras and plumes, richly ornamented clothes, and they were all kind of moving around as shadows. Young people, old people. So you had a lot of people hustling and bustling, and you had a lot of people moving around, all ornamented and decked in shining costumes. And then here we see the poet now intervenes and tells us, now let us wish them away. Now let us forget all these youngsters uh, roaming around, wandering hither and thither in the hall, and let us turn our attention to one person. Look at that lady there. There is that one lady who had spent the whole day, all that wintry day, she had been brooding or thinking about love. And she had also been meditating on Saint Agnes, as she had heard old dames, that is, as according to the stories that I had mentioned earlier, that it was believed that if you pray to Saint Agnes and observe a fast uh, that night, you could see your future husband in your dream. And so here, this young lady, she had very devoutly spent the entire day in praying to Saint Agnes with hope of seeing her husband's face, as the old dames had told her. Now, what exactly did she hear from the old dames? We can see that in the next stanza, stanza 6. They told her how, upon St. Agnes's eve, young virgins might have visions of delight, and soft adorings from their loves receive upon the honeyed middle of the night. If ceremonies due they did aright, as supperless to bed they must retire, and couch supine their beauties lily white, nor look behind nor sideways, but require of heaven with upward eyes for all that they desire. Now in stanza 6 we come to know about the Saint Agnes Eve, and how this young lady mentioned in the previous stanza, she had been informed by her by older women that young virgins would have delightful visions of their lovers or their future husbands if they could, if they would follow the ceremonies in the proper way. That is, they should go supperless. They should undertake fasting and go supperless to their bed, and they should just lie down without looking either behind nor sideways, but they should only look upward and pray to God that they could see the face of their beloved. Now, stanza 7. Full of this whim was thoughtful Madeline. The music, yearning like a god in pain, she scarcely heard. Her maiden eyes divine, fixed on the floor, saw many a sweeping train pass by. She heeded not at all. In vain came many a tiptoe amorous cavalier, and back retired. Not cooled by high disdain, but she saw not. Her heart was otherwhere. She sighed for Agnes's dreams, the sweetest of the year. Stanza 8. She danced along with vague, regardless eyes, anxious her lips, breathing quick and short. The haloed hour was near at hand. She sighs amid the timbrels, and the thronged resort of whisperers in anger or in sport. Mid looks of love, defiance, hate, and scorn, hoodwinked with fairy fancy. All amort, save to Saint Agnes and her lambs unshorn, and all the bliss to be before tomorrow morn. So in stanzas 7 and 8, we are with Madeline, and Madeline is in a very prayerful mood. She, though she stands amidst the music, she hardly hears, she hardly listens to the music being played around her. She scarcely heard the music. Her maiden eyes divine, and she has fixed her eyes on the floor. She never looks up at anyone because she doesn't want to be distracted from her prayers. And so her eyes are fixed on the floor, and she sees many a sweeping train pass by. That is, she doesn't see the faces of the people moving around her. Instead, she sees the train. Train is, the dress, the flowing dress of the women. She heeded not at all. In the sense, she did not bother to look up at anybody. She just kept her eyes fixed to the floor, and she saw many feet coming tiptoe to her, an amorous cavalier who wanted to dance with her, who wanted to woo her. But then she paid no attention to anybody. So many people come to her tiptoe, and then seeing that she is not responding, they go back, they retire. And not cooled by high disdain. It is not because she is uh, an arrogant person, but then she saw not, and maybe they too understood that she was not being arrogant. She didn't see them. Her mind was occupied elsewhere. That's why her heart was otherwhere. And she sighed for Agnes's dreams, the sweetest of the year. So uh, maybe she had somebody in her mind, and she was fervently hoping to see that face in her dreams at night. So she did not want anything to take her away from the, the bliss of dreaming of the person she desired to see. And in stanza 8, I've read the stanza earlier, she dances even when she's invited to dance. She dances with regardless eyes because she doesn't look at her part. She doesn't look at her partner, and her lips are anxious. She's chanting prayers, and she is getting more and more excited because the haloed hour, the hour when she can finally see the face of her lover, the hour is drawing close, and so she's quite disturbed, and she sighs among the timbrels and the thronged resort of whisperers. So the throng means crowd. So there are people crowding around her. People are whispering to her. Some of them are angry because she's not responding to them. Some of them are just, in sport. They are just talking to her. Uh, I mean, they are just talking to her for in jest, just light-hearted talk. So all that she hears, she doesn't listen to any of them. Some of them are looking at her with love, some of them with defiance, hate, and scorn, but she doesn't see anybody at all. All that she has in her mind is Saint Agnes and the bliss that she's soon going to enjoy. Now, we're going on to stanza 9. So, purposing each moment to retire, she lingered still. So, she is planning to retire, but then she doesn't want to leave the party too soon. So, she lingers half heartedly for some more time, waiting for the right time to leave and retire to her bedroom. Meantime, across the moors had come young Porphyro, with heart on fire for Madeline. Beside the portal doors, buttressed from moonlight, stands he, and implores all saints to give him sight of Madeline, but for one moment in the tedious hours, that he might gaze and worship all unseen, perchance speak, kneel, touch, kiss. In sooth, such things have been. So we have another person introduced to us in this stanza. And across the moors, a young man had come here to see his heart burning due to the love for Madeline, and that was young Porphyro. And he had come across the moors in the cold and damp night, and he stands outside the portal doors and shaded, buttressed from the moonlight. So buttressed from the moonlight. So you have the moonlight falling on him, but maybe he stands hidden behind one of the buttresses that conceal him from sight of others, from the sight of others. And he, as he stands there, is imploring, is praying to all the saints to give him at least one sight of Madeline. So he is praying that he would get to see her, at least see her, for at least a moment, to see her at least for a moment. And of course, if he gets a chance to kneel, to speak to her, to kneel in front of her, to touch her and kiss her, that's more than he could ask for. So the least that he hopes for is at least a moment where he can see the beautiful face of his dear, dear Madeline. So that is stanza 9.